Well, hello there, mateys. How are you doing? It's going to be a good day today. I hope I'm finding everybody well. Uh, it is a long weekend here in Alberta. We have a civic holiday. Any excuse for a holiday, as they say. And look, we've got our friend Dale in the house, Coin World UK, Austrian stackers there, Christopher Ty coining around. That's old Tupac. We had a lot of fantastic people in the house today. Patriot Prospecting is in, and I'm really excited about the topic today. As you can see, that's scrolling past us here, the Battle on the Plains of Abraham. We're getting close to the end of the series for me. I will be doing one more video on Canadian history and what went on in North America next week, and then hopefully we'll be back to our regular programming, but I will still touch on a lot of the history. Um, I hope everybody is well. I see, of course, Tupac's working on packages, as we all end up doing when we're doing live feeds, and we have different contests and different prizes going out to people. But I've been reflecting on the series that have been going on and what went on in North America during the time that we had New France and the British going head to head. And one of my perspective on this that has really come clear to me is that the French had a distinct disadvantage because many of their troops were poorly trained, and a lot of them did not want to be here. They were basically pressed into service. A lot of them were in bad situations back in France, and they were pushed to serve in North America, and their heart wasn't in it. Whereas those that moved here, those that had set up settlements, especially along the St. Lawrence River, these were hardworking individuals, regardless of whether they're British or French. But they really worked hard at what they're doing. They tried to set up relationships with the Aboriginal communities that were here, and they were hardworking people. And the one thing that I noticed, I don't know if a lot of you picked up on this, but I have, the women. The women were the ones that showed the greatest bravery during this period of time. You had these soldiers that didn't want to be here cowering in forts, whereas the women were out there musket in hand fighting off their enemies and roasting everybody to do the different battles. A tremendous amount of that went on. And of course, one thing I am proud as being a Canadian that I see, especially if you travel to Quebec, they commemorate a lot of these brave women that fought in these conflicts that were there. So today we're going to be looking at the battle that took place on the Plains of Abraham. And it's very consistent with the history we've seen leading up to this, where the French soldiers were not motivated, plus their leadership was lacking. I mean, that's not to say there weren't brave soldiers in there. It's just they had a distinct disadvantage over the British troops, who had lots of practice. They knew what they were doing, and they wanted North America, and they were very, very loyal to their king and country. So, with that in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the first of two short videos. Again, different perspectives on each one. It'll give you an idea of what went on. And afterwards, I'll open up the live feed to anybody to come up on chat, want to discuss it, want to share your collections with me. Of course, we do. This is a coin channel, but we do love the history, so we will try to integrate everything together. And if that doesn't work, we'll just have a jolly old chat. So with that, I'm going to set this up right now, and we'll see what we can do here.
The soldiers they're leading are also thousands of miles from home, but they're here because they have little choice. Most are from the cities. They are the landless, the surplus labor of France. Carpenters, apprentice wig makers, cloth cutters. Men like Joseph Douzet, Antoine Moret, Barthélemy Gerard. Most had never even heard of Quebec before they were shipped here.
Wheeling to the right from collar into line! Right wheel!
They're not much different from the men waiting for them in the British lines. The 35th Regiment is recruited largely from Ireland. Many are farmers displaced from their land. Michael Clinton, John Darby, Abel Skittle. Irishmen who have spent most of their time enforcing the British occupation of their own country. The English soldiers here are the jobless apprentices of Britain's clothing factories and shipyards. Others have a different story. The Fraser Highlanders. Their families were evicted from the Scottish Highlands by the British. The young men had no alternative but to join the very army which destroyed their way of life. James Thompson, John Fraser, Alexander Fraser. These men have nothing left to lose. Marching in the ranks of Montcalm's regiments, however, are hundreds of men who have everything to lose. Fathers and sons of the great Canadian families. D'Argenteuil, Courtemanche, Repentigny. Unlike the French soldiers, the Canadians are defending their homes and their way of life. François Clermont Boucher de la Perrière. At 51, he feels his age. I can no longer see clearly now, he says, though I have glasses on my nose. Not far from him, the next generation of his family, René Aimable Boucher de Boucherville. The Bouchers are defending almost 150 years of family and history. Charles Deschamps de Boisbert spent 2 years protecting fleeing Acadians from the British. He leads the Acadian militia this morning. Under him, Joseph Trahan, 18, an Acadian who escaped the deportation. This morning, he's a refugee and a soldier at arms. The British Army now numbers 4,441 men. To increase their firepower, Wolfe has ordered them to load 2 lead balls in their muskets instead of 1. To stretch his army out over the widest possible distance, Wolfe orders his men to form in 2 long, thin lines rather than the usual 3. One of the first to arrive is the French artillery commander Montbéliard. He scans the plains below him. The British line is a mile wide. When Montcalm arrives, he's still uncertain. The British position seems so reckless. But he doesn't know if this is their full invasion force or if they will attempt a second landing at Beauport. He can attack, or he can wait for Bougainville to arrive with reinforcements. The fate of Quebec and of Canada rests with Montcalm's next decision.
Finish your bayonet!
It is the morning of September the 13th, 1759. James Wolfe is desperate. He's placed his army in a precarious position, hoping the French will attack him. The Marquis de Montcalm is shaken and uncertain. Is this the real British invasion or a diversion? The battle for
What they don't show you here is that Wolfe set up his military across the St. Lawrence River from Quebec. You had French forces along the line of the river on the other side, but they were sporadic, and they would manage to get the bulk of their Navy ships actually down the St. Lawrence. It's quite a precarious, especially at that time, precarious river to go down. But he managed to get them all successfully down the river, and they actually set up across from the near or adjacent to the Plains of Abraham, just outside of the city, and the French actually sent across fire ships. Actually, set a bunch of ships on fire and sent them across the channel at the British, but they were completely unsuccessful. So the British managed to land downstream to the east of the city, and they started working their way up on the banks. So a lot of that isn't explained in this video, and they also expanded on the fact of the quality of the troops. I mentioned that it's those that actually lived in Quebec and New France that really had the most to lose, and they're the ones that had the heart to fight, whereas the French soldiers really didn't. This particular narrative, it shows that the British were lacking as well because of the different classes of society that were pressed into service. But in actual fact, these guys were still very well trained because they're regimentated. If they didn't do what they were supposed to do, then they paid a heavy toll, usually with floggings or worse. So it was a harsh life for them all, but still, it was the French that were actually at the disadvantage because of the training that the English had, and it was just not a pleasant situation for anybody to be in.
North America will unfold here, on an abandoned farmer's field, a mile from Quebec. It is 9:30. The real battle has not yet begun.
Fire!
At this time, Canada was French.
For 30 minutes, the British artillery pummels the French line to create disorder while the army is still forming on the hill. Montcalm decides he will not wait for Bougainville's reinforcements. He will strike at the British this morning. He rides to his artillery commander, Montbéliard.
I spoke for a moment with Monsieur the Marquis de Montcalm, who told me we will not be able to avoid the battle if we give them enough time to establish themselves who will never be able to attack with the kind of army we have.
Montcalm orders a general advance. At approximately 10 o'clock, the Battle of the Plains of Abraham begins.
The French were close enough to be effective. They fired too early.
It is a textbook maneuver. Montcalm's army will advance in a massive column. It will sweep down the hill and smash the thin red line. But the French line that started down the hill is uncoordinated, and after a short distance, the first mistake. Someone gives the order to halt the advance and fire.
Apprêtez vos armes. En joue. Rechargez vos fusils.
The ragged volley is pointless. The British are far out of range. The French resume the advance, their lines more confused and disordered with every step. Wolfe's soldiers wait.
Alignement. Régiment, back. Apprêtez vos armes.
When the French are within 40 yards of the British, they form for their second volley. This time they can see the faces of the men in the British line.
En joue. En joue. Feu. Contact.
What a way to fight.
As the French reload, the British take position to fire.
Back ready.
Finally, in the smoke and confusion, James Wolfe issues the most important military command of his life.
Fire!
The British volley is devastating. A mile-wide burst of concentrated fire. The French line is dazed, but stands its ground. Then
Okay,
the
now
Highlanders
this is
unleash
scary.
an advance with broadswords that can slice a man in half. Joseph Trahan of the Acadian militia is right in front of them.
I can remember the Scotch Highlanders flying wildly after us, with streaming plaids, bonnets, and large swords, like so many infuriated demons.
Remember, Wolfe had his men put two
As
balls
the
into
wall
their
of British
muskets,
bayonets
so
draws
it's pretty
closer,
hard to tell how far
confusion
their
finally
balls
crumbles
will
the French
travel.
line. The Battle of the Plains of Abraham has lasted barely 15 minutes. Sometime just after the British volley, James Wolfe is struck by a fatal shot in the chest. crest of the hill, Montcalm is engulfed in a stream of retreating men. Sometime in the next few moments, he is struck by a musket ball below his ribs. Most of the French flee up the hill towards the walls of Quebec. With them, Joseph Trahan.
I was amongst the fugitives and received in the calf of the leg a spent bullet, which stretched me on the ground. I thought it was all over for me, but presently I rose up and continued to run.
The British are within reach of the gates of Quebec, with the Highlanders leading the charge. Until they are stunned by a barrage of fire from the surrounding woods and fields. Hundreds of Canadian militia and Indians cover the retreating French army. The first wounded are brought to the General Hospital and to Marie de la Visitation.
We were in the midst of the dead, the dying, which were brought to us by hundreds. Many of them are friends, are relations. It was necessary to smother our grief and extend ourselves to relieve them.
Even though the French vastly outnumber the British, Vaudreuil has decided they will not fight again the next day. He orders the soldiers to abandon Quebec and to both.
All right. So it was quite the battle, and the generals in charge didn't even have the pleasure of saying the outcome. But Wolfe did defeat Montcalm on the Plains of Abraham, and that was quite a significant battle because that's when New France ceased to be. So yeah, I've got another short to show, but we'll take a break and we can invite a few people up if you'd like. And I'll put the link in the chat here. And I'd certainly love to have you come up and chat with the old skipper here. There you go. Yes. Mind-boggling what went on. Anybody else think that you pine for the good old days? Because those good old days I wouldn't want to have. That was a terrible time to live in. And if diseases didn't get you, the fighting forces that were going back and forth in North America would have. So it was a tough time to be in North America. And again, this all predates the formation of the United States and everything. This is quite a different world that we lived in. So, all right, who do we still have in the chat here? Pretty quiet. Because if I don't have any takers to come up to visit me, I'm going to throw on the next film so you can see what all went on. Ogre Coin's in. Yeah, sure. Come on up. I'll just set this up here. There, we got the next film all ready to go. Yeah, the link's in the chat there, Tupac, if you want to come up. And my buddy Dale, he's just watching and learning. Irish collector listening to. Yeah, we had I actually had a conversation a little bit earlier regarding Ireland and their contribution to what went on way back when, and it's interesting how the phrase Black Irish came to be, and a lot of people didn't realize that a lot of the Irish uh, ended up seeing their origins coming from Spain, and of course the Spanish had a darker skin and had dark eyes. A lot of it was from the Moorish influence, and so yeah, they had that into their gene pool, and then you had Charles bringing Scots over, and we had the Dublin Scots, and they mixed in with the native Irish population. So Ireland was quite a melting pot that they were drawn on because they were so poor to fight in the British Army, and so when you talk about your Irish heritage, which one are you talking about, matey? You don't know. So, well, I guess everybody's ready for the second film, and I haven't got anybody come up. I will do that. I will bring on the second film. We take a look and see a different perspective on the battle on the plains of Abraham. Well, no, in fact, this part of the video is very appealing.
So we're
back from our trip to the East Coast, and as we're passing through by Quebec City, it brings up a bit of history for me for a number of reasons. But first of all, we got yesterday here. We're home now. We got 4 inches of snow yesterday. This is almost the end of April. I don't know what's going on. Spring's kind of messing with us, but it's all melted away now. And but we're coming through Quebec City. There's like 3 feet of snow there. But we're passing the Plains of Abraham, so the battle for Quebec, which I'm going to bring up a follower that wrote to us, and he said, "I love your history by the hearth." So I've always talked about it's always a wee bit of history. So those 4 words really struck a chord with me: history by the hearth. So a wee bit of history by the hearth this morning about the Battle of Quebec, better known as the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. Actual battle for the Plains of Abraham takes place on September 13th, 1759. And the 2 main characters are General Marquis de Montcalm and General James Wolfe. But before we get into that actual battle, if we look at how the war's gone up to that point, so the 7 Years' War or the French and Indian War, whichever you want to call it, it hasn't gone very well for the English. In fact, it's gone very bad for them. Could best be characterized by a lot of victories by the French. So General Braddock has amassed the largest army the British have ever put on the colonies. He's defeated. Montcalm is able to disperse a much larger force than himself at a little place that later would be called or renamed Fort Ticonderoga. War's not going well. The turning point happens just prior to the Plains of Abraham, where the British are able to take Fortress Louisbourg in Cape Breton, what's known as Cape Breton today, and numerous other outposts in Atlantic Canada. And a 31-year-old brigadier general at the time named James Wolfe sort of distinguishes himself and is pivotal in the taking of Fort Louisbourg. So now the St. Lawrence, the entire St. Lawrence, which has been a fortress for the French side, is now opened up to the British fleet, and that's a powerful thing to have to contend with. There's another reason why this wee bit of history fascinates me. It's because my wife is related to the Wolfe clan. Her surname is Wolfe with an E. I believe, and I'm not exactly sure, but I believe she's related to James Wolfe's brother. So anyway, James, he's a really poor choice. William Pitt, he's selected him because of his valor at Fortress Louisbourg. But he's a thin man. He's sickly. He's prone to rheumatism. He gets frequent bouts of bladder infection, and in fact, the man's dying. And he's sent over there with one of the largest amassed armies on the planet, and he's a dying man. And basically, he's seeking a noble death. I think he wants to go out as a proud person, proud for his family, all that good stuff, and he leads his men accordingly. So now he's back in London, England, getting prepared for this invasion of the heartland, or the very heart, if you would, of New France. To set the stage, you try to put yourself back to 1759. When James Wolfe leaves England, he's got a quarter of the British fleet, the largest navy on the planet. He's got, 29 ships of the line, each carrying 800 souls. He's got 22 frigates. He's got 80 transport ships. He's got 55 smaller crafts. He's got 15,000 soldiers, 2,000 cannon, and 40,000 cannonballs. And these ships are loaded with surgeons, ministers, you name it, prostitutes, children, and livestock. And when he arrives at the Gulf of St. Lawrence, if you can try to have an image of this, especially in the time frame, this flotilla extends down the St. Lawrence about 90 miles long. And I visualize myself being in the fortress at Quebec City and looking out one morning and seeing the start of this long convoy of the enemy approaching the fortress. And the anticipation of what's to come. June 7th, 1759, Um, James Wolfe lands his fleet opposite Quebec City and sees the fortress for the first time. And he's pretty discouraged. Steep walled, it's 50 meters tall. Cannons are pointing down. They got the high ground. He's out of range, of course, at this point. But he realizes this is going to be a daunting task. So for the next almost month, he reconnoiters. Nothing happens. On the 28th of June, Montcalm takes the initiative. And he takes a whole bunch of small boats, builds some rafts. They load them all up with dynamite, or gunpowder, I should say. And they put one man in each of the crafts. They chain them all together, and they set them drifting down onto Wolfe's anchored fleet.
Those are the
And
fireboats I
the
told you about.
way it was going to take place, had it been successful, was one person was going to light their gunpowder at the right time. In other words, light the fuse, and that would be signal for them all to. Well, there's an explosion. They take it as the signal. They all light their gunpowder up, and they're a wee bit premature. And basically, they entertained the British with fireworks, and a lot of their gunpowder gone. So that's the initiative, and now Wolfe realizes he's really got issues. He can't figure out any way he can possibly attack this city and win. Uh, and couple that, he's got three generals under him, and none of them respect him. They're all from aristocratic, rich families, and Wolfe isn't from that, and they're not getting along. In fact, they're virtually not talking. Anyway, much to their chagrin, Wolfe decides to attack Beauport, which is just let's see, it's just east of the city, Quebec City, near Montmorency Falls. Well, it's a bad idea because the French are entrenched. They got a couple of thousand or close to 2,000 men, and they're entrenched, and they've got to attack uphill. So, much to the chagrin of his generals, Wolfe orders the attack. It's a abysmal defeat. They're driven back. There's, I think, 400 or 500 casualties, most of them fatalities on the British side, and only about 70 on the French side. Wolfe's beside himself at this point. So he decides to rage havoc on the countryside. He says, we'll starve them out, we'll burn them out. They start bombarding the fort, lower lower part of Quebec City is just literally destroyed. And they're lobbing hot shot and what have you up into the fort. In the meantime, they go out, they completely burn down 22 villages, about 2,800 homes. They destroy livestock and cattle. And it seems like a good thing at the time, but this is going to come back to bite the British in the winter that's coming up. So August 19th, Wolfe's bedridden. He's really sick, and it is three generals come up with a plan which Wolfe supports. He basically defers to them. They come up with a plan to land 5,000 men about 50 miles upriver of Quebec and attack the fort that way. Uh, the battle's delayed due to rain. The flintlocks don't work so well in the rain, so they delay the battle. Now Wolfe recovers somewhat. He vetoes that plan, and while he's sauntering along, recovering from his time in bed, he's looking up at the walls, and he finds this goat path that leads up to it, and he decides that's what he's going to do. He can't get Montcalm to come out, and had Montcalm stayed in his fort, had Montcalm never come out of that fort, the British are running out of time. Because once the St. Lawrence freezes up, they're done. They've got to get out of the St. Lawrence before freeze up. So Wolfe's back down to having about 4 weeks to accomplish that, or go back to Britain a really embarrassed general with this huge army, incapable of taking the French stronghold. So Wolfe orders about 500 men to scale this cliff. It takes them 6 hours. They're also able to take up two short-barreled 6-pound cannon. By 5 a.m. in the morning, they've got 500 men on the Plains of Abraham. The name comes from a farmer. Abraham was the last name of a fellow who owned a farm, and it's abandoned at this point, sort of stubble, corn, and brushes growing up, and it's a sloping ground. Now Wolfe's at the bottom of the Plains of Abraham. He knows if he goes to the top and gets the high ground that he's within range of the cannon of the fort. If he stays in the lower part of the field, which strategically isn't the best idea, he's out of range of the cannon. Now Montcalm, he thinks this is a two-forked attack. So he orders his men out. Now they've been at Beauport at the far end at Montmorency Falls all night. He quick marches them back to Quebec onto the Plains of Abraham. These men haven't had sleep in 36 hours. They've been on half rations because of the bombardment of Quebec City. They arrive in the field. Montcalm forms them into 3 columns. He starts the columns to move forward. And as they're moving forward very quickly, within a few meters, the center column gets way ahead of the column on the left. The column on the left open fire. And there's a lot of confusion. The British open up fire on them with their cannons, adding to that. The other thing Wolfe's done, because he can't form his typical 3-man line, 1 kneeling and 2 standing, he has a 2-man line, but he orders them each to put 2 balls down their muskets to increase their firepower. So the French now are disoriented. They've got their front way too far forward, and Wolfe raises his hand. He's shot through the wrist at this point. He gets that wrapped up. He raises his cane a second time, and he gives the last military command of his life to fire. The British fire, and probably what was one of the most lethal volleys in history of battle at that time. And hundreds of French go down, and they retreat. And the story just gets better from there. So General Wolfe, he takes a second shot at this point in his groin area. He's not dead yet. They carry him forward. He insists on them carrying him forward, where he receives a 3rd shot in his chest and a fatal shot. And approximately at the same time, Montcalm receives a fatal shot from the British side. So both generals have died. Battle's over. It doesn't last all that long. Certain victory for the British. And it's not long into September, and we have a British flag flying over Quebec City. Now, the British have to get their fleets out, so they leave a small garrison, a couple of thousand men, closer to 3,000, I guess, to garrison the Quebec fortress, and the rest of them sail for England before the freeze-up comes. Now, this is a horrible winter, and like I said, at this onset, we drove through there at the end of April, and there was 3 feet of snow. So 4, 5, 6 feet of snow isn't uncommon. Bitter cold temperatures. But they've destroyed all the farms. They've destroyed all the food. They're looking like peasants. One James Murray described in his diary, they looked like a bunch of peasant people when they'd form their lines for inspection in furs or rags or old wool blankets. And scurvy sets in. So they got famine, scurvy sets in. I think 2,000, at one point Murray records in his diary that 2,313 are sick. 648 have died. It's too cold to even bury them. They just take these bodies out and they bury them in snow, and they're going to wait till spring to actually put the bodies in the ground. But the war is not quite over at this point. The French haven't given up. So we've got the English trying to win the race, if you would, to come back in the spring, and the French trying to do the same thing, because who can ever get back first to resupply their garrisons are probably going to either take back Quebec, the fortress, or they're going to lose the whole thing. So outside of the secure walls of Fort Quebec, there's another threat. So General Francis Gaston de Levis, he's in Montreal, and he's got 7,000 French soldiers. He decides to march. This is in April of 1760. Decides to march on the fort. Now he arrives on the Plains of Abraham. And we've switched sides. That's the irony here. The French are now standing where Wolfe stood. And James Murray, General James Murray, who's taken over after Wolfe dies, he marches out his men to the top. They got all kinds of cannon, but it's spring. Cannons get mired down in the mud. And a battle ensues. But Murray makes the same mistake Montcalm had made. He starts to march towards the French downhill, giving up the high ground. Volleys go back and forth for about 2 hours. They're exchanged. There's quite a few casualties. Murray makes his way back inside the fort, and Levis makes his way back to Montreal. So the flag's still flying over the fort, the British flag, and the French flag's flying over the Plains of Abraham a few hundred yards away. And at this point, they're both waiting, and they see a single ship coming up the river, and it's flying no colors. And so they're both praying that it's going to be theirs. And it turns out the British win the transatlantic race, if you would, and they arrive at
See,
Fort
this is
Quebec.
new for me too. This is really good information.
Not only do the British win the transatlantic race, but William Pitt in England, he sends 22 ships, large ships with thousands of men and lots of supplies. And the French, due to their defeats in Europe, they're losing the war all over the world, not just in the North American continent. They send 5 ships and only 400 soldiers. So Levet makes his way back to, he retreats, gathers all his troops, makes his way back to Montreal. Now we've got a new commander, General Amherst arrives, and he leads the British too. Now Levet knows he has no chance, even though he's got approximately 7,000 soldiers. He capitulates and turns over Montreal to the English. And so in September of 1760, King George II basically has his realm grow by a half the continent of North America. And in the process, he gains 65,000 or so French-speaking Catholics in the process. Anyway, and definitely that was the turning point of a long, bloody war for the North American continent. And I digress. I should get back at my ribs here. I'm never going to get a canoe built if I keep talking, jabbering away, and I don't get any work done. So I got a few more to do, and I'll have all the ribs done, and pretty soon I'll be starting the sheathing. And in about another month, I hope to be able to find the bark we're going to need to build.
I would recommend that you check out this guy's channel. I'll put the links after our live. Wow, that was amazing. Yeah, so there you go. Wolfe defeated Montcalm on the plains of Abraham, but both the generals ended up dying. It does not look like it was a very pleasant thing to live through. My goodness. And of course, that's the end of seeing currency like this. But it wasn't the end of some of the currencies that you'd see. Again, silver was mostly Spanish, and there was a fair amount non-precious metals that came over from England. But believe it or not, yeah, it was mostly Spanish that was seen after this point. This chap was a really good storyteller. I was quite impressed with him. So I'm going to put the link one more time up. Anybody wants to come up, super. Really be happy to see it. Oh, well, that's the end of the French currency. They started using English and Spanish. Yeah, the British didn't like sending their silver over to the New World. And I'm sure a lot of the diggers and digettes that have dug stuff up, especially in the States, you'll find a lot more of it there. They find that they had a lot of slick coins down there because it's bronze or copper, and that doesn't do well in the ground. But occasionally they'll find silver, and most of the silver they find are reals and whatnot. So it's quite an interesting look at the things that you find. Of course, they also find lots of musket balls and even Civil War stuff down in the U.S. Canada, a lot of the sites like the Plains of Abraham are protected. You can't do any thing about metal detecting and stuff. That place has been done over tenfold. But overall, if you can get some of the outskirts or some of the areas in and around, especially in Ontario and Quebec, and you get some permissions, you can get into some areas where you can find some really nice finds. Out west here, it's a lot different. So we have history out here, but nothing like that they had in Ontario and Quebec. So yeah, that's pretty well it, I think, for today. So if nobody wants to come up and chit chat with me, like I say, I haven't. It's a civic holiday here in Alberta, and I've been doing a little bit of work on my collection. I've been setting aside certain items. For instance, we've got the brand new Canadian loonies that came out. These wonderful little things, and those are quite nifty. You know what, Dale? You're right. You're right. Thank goodness we got away from the thin red lines and bullets. Uh, and you know they maintained that style of warfare right up through to the First World War. It was bloody ridiculous. Advancing in a line doesn't work worth a damn when the enemy is using guerrilla tactics or tactics like advance to contacts, where you can do left and right flankings and give covering fire while you're flanked. They also took on the battlefield tactics, field part of their field craft, where if you're an attacking force, you're a minimum of 3 to 1 against an opponent that's dug in. So this whole thing of having the colorful uniforms and the flags flying and all that stuff, thank goodness that has gone to wayside, because I like General Patton's expression. He says, I don't want to have my men die for our country. Let the poor SOBs on the other side die for theirs. So, you so glad that we gotten away from that. But again, modern warfare has changed to the point where even doing camouflage and concealment, surface shape, shadow, silhouette, spacing, and movement. Yes, the 5S's and 1M is almost negated by the drones they use and the various ways of being able to see through foliage. I mean, it's shocking how things have changed. A lot of people like asking the question, well, what would it be like to have those type of tactics against a modern soldier? It would be a slaughter, because those old time soldiers, they're lucky. I think the Green Jackets were the only ones, especially when dealing with muskets. There's 3 rounds a minute, which was really good. You well imagine fighting against someone with a Browning automatic machine gun or anything like that. They just wouldn't last. Yeah. Also, of course, it's the poor buggers that are the ground pounders, the poor and destitute that were forced into fighting, that were put into the front lines, and the officers stood back and directed the whole thing. Yeah, it was a different time, and I'm really glad that I didn't live through it, because you're lucky to see 40 years of age, for Pete's sake. If you hit 50, like the one French guy, he's lucky. Of course, he wasn't fighting the whole time, but 50 years of age at that time was a very, very old person. Yeah, I was watching the movie The Patriot, and it was interesting to see how they used the Minutemen, and they were considered substandard soldiers, yet they were the ones that had the greatest impact because of their guerrilla tactics. They would do things that the poor buggers that were advancing in line would be forced to do, basically target practice for the other side. Yeah, and that's of course the advent of gunpowder that made huge difference. When you're fighting an opponent and you can look into their eyes, big difference. There's nothing that scares me more than thinking about some guy coming at me arm's length with a sword or a machete. That scares me. Yeah, it was Irish Collector. That was a good movie. It really was. Yeah. Yeah, good point too. Yes. Again, it was that they it was essentially troops were cannon fodder. I mean, and you're seeing it. I hate to say this, but you're seeing it even with the Russians today. They keep pushing the troops out, pushing the troops out, pushing the troops out, and it was all the more troops you have out there, then eventually you'll be able to overcome the enemy, and that's not a good way to fight. Yeah. If you ever get a chance, uh, uh, what was his name? Peter. They just come out. It's not 1917 was a good movie to watch. Um, there's another one here that was actually footage that Peter Jackson come out with a documentary film where he fixed it was actual footage that he corrected it. So in World War I they had the cameras, you were cranking them to make them move, so it was very jerky. It was black and white, poor, very grainy films, and he cleaned it all up, and he produced uh, uh, a film that was fully colorized. Then he went out and he found folks that lived in the areas where a lot of the soldiers, you could tell by their hat badges where they came from. He got them so they had the same accents and everything. Lip readers looked at what these people were saying in the films, and they dubbed the people in the film with what they were actually saying. He took the Royal New Zealand Artillery, and they used the sound effects from their firing to actually get the sound effects from the artillery that was firing in World War I. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It was like you were actually right there. So that's a hard. I can't watch that one too often because it is just it's real. This isn't a movie. And I'm for the life of me, I own it on Netflix. You think I can remember the name of it? No, we were soldiers. I can't remember. Yeah, yeah. There's quite a few films out there. The films that they've come out with now are so realistic. Uh, a lot of the uh, veterans that watch them actually end up getting triggered. And um, Saving Private Ryan was a good example. I was invited to the world premiere here, and my wife came with me. And of course, she's got a British sense of humor. God bless her. She's sitting next to me, and you could hear a pin drop in the theater as it was all veterans sitting there, and it was the beach. It was the beach scene where the landing of the beach, and one of the soldiers was running across the beach, and he'd lost an arm, and he picked up his arm and took it with him. And my wife, God bless her, she has a really good sense of humor. All right, she looks and in this dead silence of the theater, all you can hear is, "I hope he's got the right one." Oh man, I just about slumped under my seat. uh, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of them out there that are quite good. So anyway, being that it is a stat holiday here, a nice civic holiday, I'm going to continue working on my collection behind me. I actually got a new rig. I slide over a little bit. You can, if I'm going the right direction. Here we go. There we go. My table, so I can video some of the coins that I'm bringing in. I get most of them are in transit because it's a holiday. Hopefully, I'll get some of them in. I did get a couple of new ones in, but I found an error in my 1 cent collection, and I had to or correct, and it was I had an 1893, two of them, and so I took that 1893 and I actually gave it to my neighbor who constantly cuts my lawn for me. It's like really nice people. So I gave him a thank you, and he gave this old coin to them, and I ordered an 1896, which is the one I was missing. So and it's a little better shape, so I'll be able to finish my. I couldn't believe my 1 cent collection wasn't complete, but that's what happens when you double check and you start logging all your coins into your collection. You find mistakes, and you also find ones that you realize that, oh, that's good. That's a hold coin. It's a placeholder. I need to get myself a new one. So it pays to go and look at your collection every once in a while to get them updated. I wish I had some coins from the periods that I've been talking about. I've got a few from the UK, but not really that far back. And hopefully down the road, I'll be able to pick out a few more that I'd be able to share with you, so that I have at least that time period in my collection. And hi, Wade. Nice to see you join us. You're on the tail end of everything here today. Today, I'm going to make my wife a nice little dinner, enjoy the quiet. I've had friends and family over all weekend, or pretty well all weekend. And getting the house ready for my son and his wife and my grandchild to move in with me. It's we've been an empty nesters now for quite a few years, but this is a big house, and so we're giving them the upstairs, the top 2 bedrooms, and they're going to live with us rent free. They just have to kick in a little bit for the utilities and for their own food. And that way they can start saving money up so they can get their own place. Because trying to do that and pay for rent these days in Canada, it's gotten to the point where you have to save 20 or 25 years just to get your down payment. So I'm actually looking forward to it. I mean, I have a lot of fun with my youngest grandchild that's going to come live with us. Because it'd been 21 years since the last grandchild we had. I mean, I was expecting great grandchildren by now, and along comes another grandchild. Yeah, Shawnee, it's really hard. It really is. So we're going to have to get away from the mindset which we had back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where we have a home. Once you get your home set, your kids move out, they save up a little bit of money, get a down payment, get their own place. It doesn't work anymore. The cost of living has gotten to the point where we have to start looking like many of the families in other places in the world, where they have to live together in order to be able to afford their own place. And you got to help family. That's if you have a close-knit family, do what you can, because, we're not here forever. I mean, eventually we'll pop our clogs, and everything that was yours is going to go to someone else. It's just the nature of the beast. So I want to make sure that my children are taken care of. Oh, field guide. Of course you would say that. 1860. We're not even close to 1865. If you'd been here earlier, you would have found out we're back in like what is that, 1750? Yes. Yeah, you're way off. But so anyway, folks, it has been a slice chit-chatting with you. One of these days, I can even coerce somebody to come up and chat with me here. But until then, I'm still waiting on my buddy Dale, who should be moving fairly soon. And once he's established, I promise you, we're going to have some pretty good times between myself and Coin World UK and Austrian Stacker. I'm looking forward to that, where we can get some really good content out and talk about our various countries and different coinage we have. And we're big history buffs, so I'm going to constantly be bashing away with the Canadian stuff, because there's a lot of stuff that went on up here. A lot of people don't realize, and it's quite eye-opening to see. So with that, everybody, I wish you adieu. Have yourself a great long weekend if you happen to be enjoying it like I am, or enjoy your Monday and carry on with your week. And we will see you same bat time, same bat channel next week. Have a great day, everyone. Cheers.